My neighbor took down our shared patio fence so he could borrow my deck for a party, and now his girlfriend is hiding in my kitchen. I, 22M, moved into this townhouse complex about 6 months ago. It's my first place on my own, a basic duplex situation where I share a long wooden back deck with my neighbor, Derek, who's somewhere around 28. The deck is split right down the middle by a cheap wooden lattice privacy screen that the landlord put up when the previous tenants complained about exactly this kind of thing. Derek has always been an arrogant piece of work, constantly blasting music at volumes that rattle the shared wall, having his buddies over to drink on Tuesday nights like it's a weekend, that whole deal. I work 12-hour shifts as an tech, so I'm either exhausted, sleeping, or getting ready to go back in. I don't have the energy to pick fights with anyone, so I've always just put in earplugs and ignored him. For 6 months, that worked fine. I kept to myself, he kept to his side of the lattice screen, and we managed to coexist as two people who actively disliked each other but had decided the dislike wasn't worth acting on. I thought that was going to be the shape of things until one of us moved out. I had maybe 8 more months on my lease and had been quietly assuming he would be gone before I was. He seemed like the kind of person who burned through places quickly. Yesterday, I got home from a shift completely exhausted. I walked into my kitchen to get a glass of water, looked out the sliding glass door, and froze. The privacy screen was gone, completely unscrewed and removed, just gone. Derek's massive Weber grill, two huge Yeti coolers, and a folding table were sitting right in the middle of my half of the deck, pushed flush against my exterior wall like they belonged there. I walked next door and banged on his front door. He answered wearing a backwards hat and holding a beer, the picture of someone who had absolutely no concern about what I was going to say. "Dude, what the hell is this?" I said. "Where is the divider? Why is your stuff on my patio?" Derek took a slow sip of his beer. "Chill out, man. I'm having the boys over for the UFC fight tomorrow. Needed the square footage. I'll put it back Sunday." "You didn't even ask me. Move it back. I have a friend coming over tomorrow night and we want to sit outside." "Just tell her you're throwing a sick party," Derek smirked. "Don't be a little bitch about it. It's one weekend." He shut the door in my face. I walked around to the back, grabbed the handle of his grill, and dragged it back over the property line. It was caked in grease, and I got black grime all over my hands and arms. I shoved his coolers back, too. I didn't break anything, but I made sure every single piece of his stuff was on his side of the deck. An hour later, Derek pounded on my front door. "You scratch my grill, motherfucker," he yelled through the wood. "Stay off my property," I yelled back. He kicked the door hard once and said, "We'll see about that." I stood in my hallway for a minute just listening to make sure he had actually gone back inside. Then I locked every window and door in the place and went to bed, though I didn't sleep much. Derek and his buddies were loud all night, screaming at the TV. I stayed inside with my headset turned all the way up, playing games, trying to just outlast it. Around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed, a motion alert from my front door camera. I checked the feed and saw someone frantically waving at the lens. It was Cassie. She was sobbing, clutching a backpack to her chest, looking over her shoulder. I opened the door and she practically fell inside. "Can I please come in?" she hyperventilated. "Please?" I let her in and locked the deadbolt behind her. I pulled the blinds on the front window and the kitchen window facing his side of the deck. Cassie was standing in the middle of my living room with her arms wrapped around herself, breathing in short, ragged bursts. She had clearly been crying for a while before she knocked. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "No," Cassie gasped, trying to slow her breathing. "I'm not hurt, but I need you to see something." She pulled out her phone. He found his iPad. He left it unlocked on the kitchen counter while he was outside smoking. I looked at it. She pulled out her phone and showed me photos she had taken of the screen. It was an iMessage group chat with his buddies. Derek hadn't just decided randomly to steal my patio space for a UFC party. He had a plan. His buddy Jared had been evicted the month before and needed somewhere to land, but my unit was the only one in the complex with the larger floor plan. Derek had been actively running a campaign to terrorize me into breaking my lease so Jared could move in. Then Cassie swiped to the next photo. "He installed a trail cam in the oak tree behind the deck," she whispered, trembling. "It's pointing right into your living room and bedroom windows. He's been trying to catch you doing something, drugs, anything, to report to the landlord." I felt sick. I looked at the photo of the chat on her screen. Derek's text read, "Kid is a pussy. Jared, go slash his back right tire tonight. He'll miss his hospital shift tomorrow and get fired. One step closer to eviction." I let the blinds drop back and looked out the front window. My car was parked under the street lamp. Two guys were standing near the back of it. One of them was crouching down. Update 3. I dialed 911 and told dispatch there were men actively vandalizing my car. While I was on the phone, a massive thud shook the shared wall. Then my front doorknob started rattling violently. "Cassie," Derek roared from the porch, "get the fuck out here. I know you went in there." Cassie screamed and ran into my kitchen, wedging herself between the refrigerator and the counter. "The cops are on the way, Derek. Back off," I yelled through the door. "Open the door. You're dead, you little shit." Something hard cracked against the front window. He'd thrown something at the glass, but the double pane held. The dispatcher was telling me to stay away from the windows and keep everything locked. The police arrived fast this time. I heard screaming outside before the lights even stopped moving through my blinds. I opened the door. Derek was on the grass wrestling with an officer, screaming incoherently. His buddy Jared was already pressed against the hood of a cruiser in handcuffs. He had literally still had a pocket knife in his hand near my back tire when the first squad car pulled up. The knife was sitting on the hood next to him. I ran over to the sergeant, the same one from the chairs incident, who had told me it was a civil matter and left, and showed him the photos on Cassie's phone. The group chat, the plan to slash my tire so I'd miss a hospital shift and get fired. The admission about the trail cam pointed at my windows. The sergeant read through them with his flashlight, scrolling carefully. He handed the phone to another officer and walked into the backyard without a word. He shined his flashlight up into the oak tree branches and climbed up onto the fence railing to get closer. "Got it," he called down. He reached into the branches and pulled out a small black camouflage trail camera, the kind hunters use to photograph deer. It had been zip-tied to a branch at exactly the right angle to look directly into my living room and bedroom windows. Derek was charged with terroristic threats, attempted vandalism, and invasion of privacy for the camera. He was still screaming as they put him in the cruiser. Cassie gave her statement calmly and clearly. One of the officers drove her to her sister's place across town when it was done. Update 4. 3 days later. Derek was out on bail, but the judge had granted an emergency restraining order. He wasn't allowed within 500 feet of the townhouse. His parents came by with a U-Haul and silently packed up his belongings under police supervision. Two uniformed officers stood in the driveway the whole time. Nobody said anything to me. The whole operation was quiet and grim, like a cleanup after something everyone wished hadn't happened. Cassie texted me to say thank you and that she had broken up with him and blocked his number. I told her I was glad she was okay. That was the last I heard from her. I thought it was over. I thought I finally understood the full picture. A selfish, aggressive neighbor who wanted to push out a younger tenant so his evicted buddy could take the unit. Petty and mean, but comprehensible. I was completely wrong about the scope of it. An hour ago, I went out to the back deck with replacement lattice panels from Home Depot to fix the divider Derek had torn down. I was measuring the gap on the wall where his grill had been pushed against the siding. While I was tapping the wood, I noticed the vinyl siding on my half of the duplex was loose. The bottom panel, right where Derek's grill had been sitting for months, pushed flush against the wall, was completely unclipped from the track. I pulled it back expecting to find rotting wood or water damage. The grill had been there long enough that moisture damage was plausible. There was a hollow cavity cut into the insulation behind the siding. Someone had done it deliberately, carved out the space and left it there. Inside the cavity was a heavy black garbage bag wrapped tightly in duct tape. I pulled the bag out. It weighed about 10 pounds. I set it on the deck, took my box cutter, and sliced a line down the tape. It was packed with hundreds of loose driver's licenses, passports, social security cards, and stacks of banded cash. I just sat there on the deck staring at it in the afternoon light, trying to make my brain work. Derek hadn't wanted my patio space for the UFC party. He had needed access to my side of the deck because he was stashing stolen identity documents inside my exterior wall. If the police ever raided his unit, they would find nothing. The stash was technically on my property. That was why he had been so unhinged about the property line. That was why he wanted Jared in my unit. They needed someone on the inside to protect the stash house. The cops hadn't found this when they arrested him. His parents hadn't found it packing up his things. I sat on the deck for a long time, just staring at the contents of that bag. Hundreds of people's identities, their whole documented legal existence, driver's licenses with their photos, their addresses, their birth dates, passports, social security cards, stacks of banded cash that had presumably been drained from accounts tied to those names. Some of the licenses were from different states. This wasn't opportunistic petty theft. This was organized, systematic, large scale. I thought about Derek's grill sitting against my exterior wall for months, about how aggressively he had reacted when I moved it back, about the trail cam pointed at my windows, not just to catch me doing something embarrassing, but to make sure I wasn't getting close enough to the siding to find what was behind it, about Jared needing to move into my unit specifically. It all clicked into place at once, and I felt genuinely sick. I was about to go inside and call 911 when I heard a truck engine cut off in Derek's empty driveway. Someone jumped the back fence into the yard. I could hear boots hitting the wooden deck steps, moving fast. I went inside, grabbed my phone and a kitchen knife, and dialed 911. SAW and occurred in 2 more nights weary. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold either of them. The 911 dispatcher was calm and steady in my ear. Do not go outside. Keep all doors locked. Officers are less than 2 minutes away. I stood in the dark kitchen and listened. The heavy boots crossed the deck and stopped where Derek's grill used to sit. A few seconds of silence, then the vinyl siding cracked as someone ripped it violently off the track. He wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. He was frantic. I heard him tearing at the insulation. Then, fuck, where is it? The boots sprinted toward my sliding glass door. The handle rattled violently. He was trying to yank it open, but I had jammed a thick wooden dowel in the bottom track after Derek kicked my front door earlier that week. He started pounding on the glass with an open palm. "Open the door! Where's the bag?" It wasn't Derek's voice. Deeper, raspy. Someone else from the ring. "The cops are pulling up right now," I yelled back through the glass, my voice cracking completely. "Get away from my house!" The flashing lights hit my blinds. The pounding stopped. I heard boots scramble across the deck and a loud crash as the man vaulted over the new lattice panels I had just bought and installed hours earlier. "Police, open the door!" from the front porch. I dropped the knife on the linoleum, ran to the front, and threw the deadbolt. 2 officers rushed in with guns drawn. I pointed at the back deck. They pushed through the kitchen and out the slider, but the man was already gone into the woods behind the complex. Another officer stayed with me. I was shaking so hard I had to sit down. I pointed at the duct-taped bag on the kitchen table. He was looking for this. The same sergeant from Friday night walked in a few minutes later. He looked at the ripped open bag, the loose passports and stacks of banded cash spread across my kitchen table, and the empty cavity visible through the back window where the siding had been torn off. He let out a long, slow breath. "Holy shit," he said. Detectives were in my kitchen until 4 a.m. They bagged everything as evidence, photographed the cavity in the siding, and had me walk through the entire timeline from the beginning. One of the detectives told me off the record that this was way above the local department's pay grade. Derek and his associates were likely part of a large-scale mail fraud and identity theft operation, stealing from high-end neighborhoods, opening fraudulent lines of credit, draining accounts. They had been using my unit's exterior wall as a dead drop specifically because if their address was ever searched, they would be clean. Derek had sent someone else to recover the stash before the police could find it. My landlord was horrified by the police report and let me break my lease that morning with no penalty. I packed a bag while the detectives were still working in my kitchen. I didn't even think about what I was grabbing, just threw whatever I could reach into a duffel and got out. My landlord called me at 7 a.m., completely horrified by the police report, and told me I could break the lease effective immediately with no penalties and no questions. I signed the paperwork digitally from the motel parking lot. I'm in a Motel 6 across town right now. Deadbolt locked. I shoved the wooden dresser against the door before I could even sit down. I've been jumping at every car door that slams in the parking lot, every set of footsteps in the corridor outside. Derek's bail is almost certainly being revoked. The identity theft stash changes everything about the scope of what he was charged with. Federal investigators are involved now, but I still don't know who was on my deck last night. The man who came for the bag is still out there somewhere, and he knows exactly who found it. I'm driving to my parents' place a state over tomorrow morning. I need to be somewhere no one connected to any of this knows about while the investigation moves forward. The detective handling the federal side of it has my number and told me not to go anywhere without letting them know first. I told him I understood and meant it. 6 months ago, I was just a 22-year-old ER tech excited about his first apartment. Now I'm in a motel room with a dresser against the door, waiting for the feds to finish dismantling whatever the hell my neighbor was running out of the wall of my home. Fuck this place. I mean every single word of it.
Hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please like and subscribe. See you in the next one.